The war in Mexico between cartels and the US authority are some of the most dangerous conflicts on the planet. Cartels are a formidable force because members who give their life to the cartel are broken down to the bare bones, the minimum, they're stripped away, and then they're rebuilt to be trustworthy, devoutable, and most of all engage without fear. Cartels operate outside the four corners of law of legislation and government rules. Think about this. Cartels and their crimes like trafficking cost the US an estimated $193 billion each year. And in order to stop drugs from entering the US, the government also spend on average $5.5 billion to support things like patrols, training, surveillance, and also advice. That's a lot of cash considering the US spend approximately $2.28 trillion. Now the US have a southern border of 2,000 miles, and the US estimate that each time products cross over from Mexico and land on US soil, their communities become junkies, another family is decimated, another business is declared bankrupt due to the crime that follow. Cocaine, heroin, fentanyl dislodge all major structures, healthcare, safety, and security industries. So bad is the problem that at any given time, American state departments issue half a dozen do not travel warnings for half a dozen Mexico states due to the growing conflict between police and cartels. And at the helm of these criminal organizations are cartels like the Gulf Cartel. Now the Gulf Cartel controls the border city of Matamoros. They are 9 times out of 10 considered one of the most oldest cartels in Mexico, and at one point they were considered the most dangerous. In 1984, the Gulf Cartel, known as Cartel de Golfo, was a small dealing organization. They managed to broker a deal with the Cali Cartel, which had a mega Colombian structure that was looking for entry points into the US to cash in on potential customers after the old routes like the Caribbean routes were destroyed. So the two cartels went back and forth, and then eventually they brokered a deal. The Gulf Cartel would take all the risk, but they would also share 50% of the profits. In 1996 alone, the Gulf Cartel was raking in billions of dollars each year. Cash was so much that it had to be transported on planes, in suitcases, in boots, and also a series of underground tunnels or strapped to people's stomachs, legs and arms. However, all good things must come to an end. Cartels like the Los Zetas had expanded its operations, and they used shock and awe tactics such as wiping out innocent families to send a message to communities and local cartels like the Gulf Cartel. They also took off heads and also stormed regions, leaving nothing but destruction, ashes, and crying families in its wake. Now the Gulf Cartel could not keep up. Now regardless of the fact that the criminal syndicate is no longer considered a powerhouse within Mexico, the name and its rich history still sent whispers of fears to ranch owners that are afraid that the land is going to be snatched by cartels, and even greater, the political systems that end up safeguarding the general public due to corruption and economic turmoil. On the surface, the Gulf Cartel lost much of its power after bosses were either killed or detained in international criminal investigations that only came to a conclusion after pockets of mercenaries went to war in the back of their pickups with the government. Case in point, the local war between the army and rebels in Nuevo Laredo, where 8 people lost their lives. With territories like Matamoros up for grabs, smaller factions then began to collaborate with local gangs, frankly because they didn't have the people or the time to train other people as well. Underlings then began to use the Gulf Cartel name to vie for control of the borderlands and control their own independent profits, without the respect of getting approval from leaders. With the fragmented cartel came new ideas, newfound greed, and also chaos and havoc. Things like order and tradition and direction was muted, and in its stead, laws like respecting the life and well-being of the innocent went out the window completely, 100%. On March 3rd, 2023, 4 Americans, Eric Williams, Zindell Brown, and cousins Latavia Tay McKee and Shaeed Woodard were kidnapped shortly crossing south of Brownsville, Texas, with the intention of going for medical procedure. Now, shortly after crossing the border into Matamoros, the car the group were travelling in was ambushed by members of the Gulf Cartel, who was acting on their own accord without direction or the go-ahead. According to reports, the cartel thought that the 4 Americans were either Haitian traffickers or rivals and had tried to take over the cartel's territory. They weren't having it. Now, the reason the 4 Americans looked suspicious was because they had actually gotten lost, looking for the medical clinic. So, of course, their car would have slowed to a stop. They would have probably circled areas once, twice, 3 times. Now, the cartel fired upon the white minivan, striking multiple people. The cartel then opened the damaged door and dragged the 4 Americans out one by one out of the car before shoving them into another waiting vehicle before they sped away. All reports indicate that the incident was just a big misunderstanding. Mexico authorities launched a mission to rescue the captives from a wooden house in Matamoros, and it was deemed successful on the 7th of March. However, 2 of the 4 victims were found dead, Shaid Woodard and Zindel Brown. After the incident, the Gulf Cartel Scorpion faction asked the community to be calm. The cartel then wrote a letter and gave it to a local authority, showing that they had handed over the rogue members of the cartel who acted on their own accord. In the letter, a picture showed cartel members face down on the ground, hands tied behind their back on the pavement, and the letter summarizing says that they would hold the people responsible and sort the problem out. Now, the main reason for the apology is that the drug business is still a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the cartel do not need the US taking a deeper look into the rampant crimes from cartel operations. The cartel is still a splintered organization. They deal with arms trafficking, humans trafficking, and drug trafficking. The fact of the matter is this: despite the fact that the Gulf Cartel may be in disarray and fragmented, they are the outline. They are the blueprint to how at least 80% of all the other cartels operate. If you look up the most dangerous cartels, the Gulf Cartel will still be ranked in the top 10, along with Los Zetas. However, Los Zetas in the early 90s were in fact part of the Gulf Cartels. Commandos in the Mexican army had grown tired of going to war for peanuts. They deserted their ranks and began working for the enforcement arm of the Gulf Cartel, earning more money, more reputation, more notoriety, and of course, named Los Zetas. It was only in 2010 that the Los Zetas had outgrown the Gulf Cartel, namely because most of its high-ranking members were either in the ground or in jail. All the elements supplied to the Los Zetas given by the Gulf Cartel, like notoriety, reputation, authority, and money, meant nothing, and Los Zetas decided to overthrow the Gulf Cartel's reign in specific patches of territory and took over operations. Stay safe.